Hey, ladies and gents, and welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, episode 128. Today we're going to be covering our Game of the Year, our personal lists, and our cumulative list for 2018. As always, I'm joined by Jordan.
Greetings, mates.
And Dom.
See these things above my head? Ceiling tiles. No longer am I in a dungeon.
No longer in the Dungeon of
Nicely
Doom.
done.
So we're going to be covering our personal GOTY lists, as well as talking about when we add all of our own opinions together, what our controlled interests GOTY list is. Some interesting stuff, some usual suspects, some things you probably expect on our list. Do you guys want to go round robin, or do you want to go, I'll give my 5, and then we'll, Dom and Jordan, or do you guys want to go 5-5-5, 4-4-4? What are you guys thinking?
I don't know. What do you want to do?
Here's what we'll do. I actually have an idea. I'll do my 5-4-3, then you'll do your 5-4-3, then Jordan, and then we'll do our two ones. Kind of just build up the anticipation. Yeah, okay.
A nice hybrid.
Exactly. So I'll go
Build
first.
the anticipation.
And some of the stuff I'll talk about more than others, just in case I think that you guys might not have it on your list. And other stuff I'll save for you guys to chat about. But number 5, Monster Hunter World. This is actually surprising for me when I was looking back at all the games I played in 2018. When the year started, I was very interested in this game. We had discussions about, was this game going to be as obtuse as Monster Hunters in the past? Turns out it was more casual than any of the other entries. Still had some things for Western gaming tendencies that it can fix, and maybe in the sequel or whatever happens to be the next release that they do on the scale, fix a lot of that stuff. But man, it was great. I remember as a kid reading about Monster Hunter, the franchise, when it was first announced, and I'm like, there's a video game where you can hunt giant animals and get their parts and make armor from it, and it was really cool. But then as I grew older, I realized that I either didn't have the systems it was available on, or I read reviews and it was very obtuse and it was kind of intimidating, right? But now in 2018, when I had the chance to play Monster Hunter World, I loved it. Fell in love with it. I love the item customization. I love that I can play through that game a very specific way that's different from what how Jordan would play through it. It was probably one of my biggest surprises of the year, I would say. Really enjoyed Monster Hunter World. Number 4, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. This is one that I was anticipating that would rank pretty highly on my list, but I wasn't sure. Assassin's Creed Origins was a very good game. AC Odyssey, for all intents and purposes, I think blows it out of the water. It took a lot of the new systems that Origins implemented into the Assassin's Creed franchise and made them better. The combat where it's kind of Souls-like in a way. Just some of the ways that they're approaching the Assassin's Creed franchise that, it's tough. It's like the devil and the angel on your shoulder, because some of these things that they're adding are really cool, but they're also taking away some of the stuff that I've loved, being somebody who's played Assassin's Creed from the very beginning. We've had this conversation, Jordan. That being said, Odyssey, I think the Assassin's Creed games, and maybe Ubisoft games in general, have some of the most built-in value for a video game. For $60, you get a lot of it. I know people...
Unreal.
There's the joke with Ubisoft, like, oh, there's go unlock all the towers and the maps filled with the icons. And I do think it was worse a couple of years ago as it is now with all that stuff. I still think that's a huge part of their game design, but I don't think it detracts from the quality of their games. For instance, with AC Odyssey, I did almost everything in that game. So I finished the main campaign, I did all of the cult stuff, I did a lot of the side missions, I did the whole end area of the game. I don't want to spoil it because I just remembered that Jordan is diving into it, so I don't want to spoil this last section.
And
of the
Jordan,
game you can do.
You don't want this spoiled, so by the way, steer clear of anything, because I think Jerrad would agree. You in particular will appreciate the shit that he just didn't say, so keep that in mind.
It's very Assassin's Creed-y, Jordan. So for us who love that stuff, that some people are like, take that out of my Assassin's Creed games. It's really cool.
Not my Assassin's Creed.
That being said, I don't know if it ends up on your list, Dom, but we talked about how you finished the main campaign and you were satisfied with that, and you felt there was a lot of other stuff to do. It just wasn't intriguing enough for you, and that's fine, right? There's as much or as little of that game that you want to do. So
I don't even know if I'd say that. It's like I could have kept playing, but I got so many other games I want to play that I had to cut myself off almost. So it's kind of one of those weird things where this game is overwhelmingly large, but I would have liked to keep going, but I got to a point where it's like, at that, after 40 some hours, I was like, okay, now the scales are kind of tipped where I want to get to other stuff.
Exactly. And at the end of the show, after we finish our GOTY list, I actually want to talk about what we thought were some of the biggest things that happened in 2018 in terms of maybe software or services or anything like that. And specifically, I want to talk about how you played through AC Odyssey, because I think that's really awesome for the future of what gaming could possibly be. And lastly, my number 3, Red Dead Redemption 2. I know this may be surprising that it's not in my top 2. It was a tough argument between my top 3. I'll get to that when I reveal my 2 and 1 later, and explain how exactly Red Dead Redemption 2 came in at number 3. Love the game. I thought the narrative was great. People hated the pacing of the game. I'll still argue that slow pacing doesn't mean bad pacing. I think that people get that misconstrued. Just because the game's slowly paced doesn't mean it's badly paced. I do think this still suffers from the Rockstar gameplay in terms of shooting mechanics. That's easily the weakest part of that game, in my opinion. I do wish there were more set pieces in the game. The set pieces that they do have are really great, but I don't think there's a whole lot of them. I think the characters in Red Dead are really strong. That's one thing I'll say, that if people actually invest time in this game, you'll realize that the pacing of the game is on purpose to help you learn more about Arthur Morgan and his relationships with other people in the gang. And though all the characters won't gel with you, you'll learn a lot about them, and they'll definitely feel like unique characters in this world. I think the open world that they built was second to none in terms of variety and the amount of creatures and the amount of activities you can do, and it's one of the deepest open worlds I've ever played, and I don't even think it's the largest by any means in terms of actual land area. But I loved Red Dead Redemption 2. Had its flaws, but I think it was one of the more innovative games last year, and for better or worse, they made the game that they wanted to make, which works when you have FU money, right? So yeah, those are my 5, 4, and 3. Dom, you're up next.
All right, that's a solid 5, 4, 3. I like that. I'm glad Monster Hunter World got some mentions already.
Yeah, loved it.
So really, really quick, I promise I won't go into any depth. Honorable mentions for me: Hollow Knight, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. We've talked about it before. I just got to spit those out because they didn't make my final. So anyway,
real quick, since we're doing top 5, I'll do my 2 honorable mentions: Subnautica, which I loved, even though I don't like deep water necessarily, and Celeste. So yeah,
just really quick, wanted to get those. Anyway,
yeah.
So my 5 top, the 5th best game in my opinion of 2018, Far Cry 5.
Ooh.
This is a really good game. Had some problems, like graphically. I'll start with the problems and then I'll end on the highs. So, like any Far Cry game, you can get in your planes and your choppers or whatever else and go way up in the air and you see all the mountains and the trees and such. A lot of texture pop in and that kind of stuff when you look off in the distance in this game. Which, oddly enough, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, an equally, actually much larger game, I didn't notice as much of those problems. I guess you can't fly in planes as high in that game, so that's maybe part of it. But yeah, so other than that, one other negative with Far Cry 5, they took out some of the crafting and some of the stuff I actually preferred in the older Far Cry games. So they took some of that stuff out, and the perk system was a little different. I wasn't crazy about it, but otherwise, this was still Far Cry. We're still, running around, doing Far Cry things, blowing shit up, except this time we're in Montana, and we got this crazy, super religious cult that's taking things over. The villain, the main villain, wasn't as interesting as, Voss or Pagan Min from Far Cry 3 and 4, but that was alright. He was still, weird enough and creepy enough. Weird final boss fight with him, by the way. I didn't understand what the heck was going on there, but nonetheless, this was a really cool world that they had built out in Montana. It was kind of exactly how you expect it, but they made it more fun than you might have expected, where we were kind of worried, there's not as many, exotic animals and stuff in the U.S. as in, the Himalayas and, the settings of the other games. But Far Cry 5 was there was still a shit ton going on and a ton of fun stuff to do. And I was ready for this kind of game earlier this year. I think it came out in February or March, maybe even January. I don't know. It was early in the year. And I had been kind of just itching for this sort of gameplay for a while. So it dropped at just the right time for me, and I had a shit ton of fun playing that game. So for that alone, it had to make my list. So Far Cry 5, excellent game, thumbs up from Dom.
The dumb double thumb up.
Yeah. Number 4, Fallout 76. Most years, I would have been shocked if you told me I would have ranked a brand new Fallout game as, only my 4th best game of the year, because I'm like one of the biggest Fallout fans I know. Actually, probably the biggest Fallout fan I know, but you get where I'm going. Yeah. But Fallout 76 was kind of lacking. I'm still not done with it, actually, so I still got a lot more to play, but I think I'm 20 hours in or so enough to judge it somewhat. It's kind of lacking narratively compared to previous Fallout games. It's more of Fallout 4 in that regard. You don't get a lot of the branching storyline stuff and deep RPG elements that previous Fallout games had, which were the bigger reasons I love them. But you still get a graphically improved version of Fallout 4 with some quests that are still interesting enough, and you get that world, that post-apocalyptic world with that, stuck in the 50s aesthetic going on. So that's all there, and that's shit. I just sucked that up. So I'm still into that. The online elements, I don't know. I haven't gotten far enough into the game for it to even notice it. Had a few players give me some gear and stuff where I was like, at one point I got stuck and all my weapons were broken and I'm sitting in this stupid ass town and I couldn't do this quest because I had no weapons, and to repair them I needed adhesive, and for some damn reason I couldn't find any adhesive. It's one of the materials, and some dude in his tricentennial Uncle Sam suit just comes trotting along, Honey Badger 69 XXO or whatever his name was, I don't know. And he just starts jumping in front of me, and so I pop my mic on. I'm like, hey man, do you have any adhesive? I notice he's level 55 or something, which is way high. Or maybe 50 is the cap. I don't know. He's way higher level than me. So I just say that, and he never actually verbally replies, but he drops a little paper lunch bag. Okay, interesting. So and then he does a little, I guess you'd call it an emote, motioning towards it. So I go pick it up. It's 50 adhesives.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yes. And I was like, okay, all right, I see what's going on here. I repaired all my guns and then went about my merry way.
And then I killed you and teabagged you.
Yeah, no. So right in that moment, I was the one moment that there was anything at all, multiplayer-wise, where I was like, okay, I see what they were going for with this. I didn't get enough of that yet. I still got to get back to the game and stuff. But in that moment, I was like, okay, I see this is what could potentially put this game as a new something that makes it great and not just okay. So, and then PvP wise, I don't understand their strategy with that at all, because there pretty much isn't PvP as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't make sense to me. There's not enough people in the world for it to even be possible, really. There's only 12 people or something per map, or 20, I don't know, but it's a giant map. So when you shoot someone, it doesn't actually harm them. Basically, they've tried to make it extra snowflakey, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
They didn't want to make it too severe and harsh on people, to get, what's the word? Griefed or whatever. Yeah. They didn't want people going around griefing and making it just inaccessible to new players and stuff like that. But I think they would have been, better served to maybe put in a section of the map where it's just free PvP, where you kind of go in, kind of like the old RuneScape days, where there are sections where everyone can just slaughter each other if they choose to go there, because that aspect of the multiplayer, it basically was non-existent from what I experienced. So, I mean, that was a missed opportunity, and of course, I'm sure they're going to make tons of updates and stuff like that. But yeah, I didn't have too many problems as far as bugs in this game either. So I know a lot of people call it broken and it's a bag of shit or whatever, but I maybe I was just lucky. I mean, I was irritated by the number of times the game was down for maintenance, and they keep on putting out patches which take a long time to download, so that was kind of annoying, here and there. But as far as actual bugs in the game and performance, I didn't have very many problems. Nothing I didn't see in Fallout 4, I guess.
Yeah.
It wasn't a drastic improvement in performance, So if you were already disappointed with their previous games, like it's not much better. But yeah, Fallout 76. So I had to put it in the list. I still got more I want to get in there. Probably pop that platinum one of these days. So yeah, overall I liked it. It's a good game. That was a monologue. Number 3. Luckily, you already said a lot about it. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I would not have guessed I would even have played this game. But since Google's Project Stream, which I raved about enough in previous weeks, since I got to get into that beta, whatever they call it, play it for free. Play it on a freaking MacBook Air with no memory or processing power at all. Just right up in the Chrome browser, and nice Xbox Bluetooth controller plugged right in. Everything you said about it is true. This is an awesome giant game. I think it's a lot of the comparisons to The Witcher 3 I think are pretty valid. It's in terms of scope and polish, it's right up there. The only thing I'll add to what you said is the writing, specifically for Cassandra. I've said it before. She's an awesome character. One of the best video game characters I can recall in recent memory. So definitely pick her at the beginning when you're picking between her and Alexios. I can't stress that enough, because
even just from a performance standpoint and voice acting, easy choice.
Yeah, just top to bottom. Like, her voice acting is really well done. The writing is really well done. She's funny but also terrifying, and witty. It's just, I don't know, just a really well done character in a video game, which is nice, especially in an RPG where you're choosing dialogue options, right? Much better than if Fallout 4, the dialogue options were pretty much fucking stupid, so they don't even really compare. But I think to the Mass Effect, where you choose, out of 5 options or whatever, what you're going to say, and Shepard would, kind of, have a variation of what you picked on the words, I guess, but it wasn't as interesting as it is in this. You can pick, like, the one example, Jerrad, I told you about. I said something along the lines of, "I'm going to kill you," was the selection I made, and then she just went on, like, a 20-second, like, tirade about how she's going to cut this guy's stomach open and rip his and tie his intestines around his neck. And it was just like, holy shit. It actually makes choosing the dialogue options meaningful and, like, impactful. So yeah, I can't go on enough about how cool that character is. So number 3, Assassin's Creed Odyssey.
Nice. We talked about this last week, and it's tough for me because I love my boy Ezio, but Cassandra has a strong case for being my favorite Assassin's Creed protagonist. She's just a very well fleshed out character. But yeah, I don't know if she passes Ezio for me, but I love her to death. Like, easily one of my favorite characters last year. Jordan, what are your 5, 4, and 3? In your honorable mentions.
Yeah. My connection has been a little touch and go here, so I might sound a little glitchy. But honorable mentions. Far Cry was good. It's in my top 10, Dom. And then Dead Cells and Into the Breach.
Oh, yeah.
Just a couple quick shout-outs there. Monster Hunter World, I did enjoy and play for quite a bit, but it wasn't all the way there for me, and it's something that I would like to get back to at some point. I'm just not sure if that's going to happen. And then another quick honorable mention to Mario Tennis Aces. I wanted this game to be better than it was. It certainly doesn't seem to be as bad as what the last Mario Tennis game was on Wii U. But it also doesn't seem like it's all the way there as far as what we're looking for. But the multiplayer is mostly there, and there's a lot of fun to be had with the game, so I did still want to give it a shout out. But it had some stuff, especially I talked about racket health and just kind of the I guess stupid is a good way to put it. The single player campaign just wasn't great. There's a lot of dumb shit with it, so yeah. There's just
weird difficulty spikes, right?
Weird difficulty spikes, and then kind of like we'll talk about with Smash, I'm sure, how they have some challenges and different levels and stuff, and they're just, some of them are just whack. Whack is a good way to put it. Sometimes Nintendo is just so far off the mark, and you're kind of left standing there wondering what the hell is going on. And I think the solo campaigns for both Smash and Mario Aces has got plenty of those moments, unfortunately. But on to my top 5 anyways. This one, number 5, was a little bit difficult to choose because it technically came out earlier than last year on PC. But this is always kind of a debate. A lot of times, indie games will come out on PC and then don't show up on console for maybe even several years sometimes. So, but with the release on Switch, I wanted to go ahead and add Hollow Knight to my list. It's
hell yeah,
a special game. It's a special game just in general, but then also obviously for its genre, it's special. There's a lot of Metroidvania-esque stuff coming out around the time that this released on Switch last summer, and I think it still fortunately shines through that crowd, even with stuff like Dead Cells, even though they do have some differences fundamentally. But Hollow Knight also has a lot of other stuff going for it. I still have plenty left to play and would like to jump in deeper. It is a difficult game, and I'm not going to lie and say I haven't had trouble with it. But it has a lot of Lovecraftian and horror vibes. In a lot of ways feels similar to what you would think a 2D Bloodborne would feel like, with quick-paced action and kind of deeper hack and slash combat. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff with Hollow Knight, but I feel like, a lot of people, including us, have talked a great deal about the greatness of Hollow Knight. So not too much to say, but yeah, definitely like that game a lot.
I think it counts for being on the
4.
list too. Sorry to interrupt you. Dom and I talked about this, but like with Hollow Knight and games where they come out on PC and then they make their way to console the following year, I think that's justifiable. I think when it's like an early access game or a game that comes out on one console, I think that's where there's more of a discussion. I think it's fine if a game comes out on PC and then gets ported to consoles. I think it counts for 2018.
Well, what was the comment I made, Jerrad, where like it may have came out in 2017, but 80% of people played it upon its releases in 2018, right?
That's when people actually talked about it, yeah. Go ahead, Jordan.
Switch release was big for Hollow Knight. So, number 4 is God of War PS4, and next up I'll get into a little bit of the reasons why it's not at the number 3 spot with the next game. But as far as God of War goes, obviously I've talked a lot about how much I love the franchise, and especially the original trilogy on PS2. And definitely, one of my favorite PlayStation franchises and favorites on the PS2 as well. So definitely had a lot of anticipation coming into this game. I can remember all the way back to the concept art leaks of the different, Norse mythology that we were going to be looking at in this game, and getting very excited from that. And I think that going with Norse mythology was a great plan, and they definitely nailed it in that aspect. They nailed a lot of aspects of the game. The visuals, I think, are obviously gorgeous, but also the design and the concepts that they're working with, the artistry. I've been looking at the art book since I beat the game, and they just nailed it. Sony Santa Monica is obviously one of the more talented studios in the world, and certainly in Sony's stable. So they nailed a lot of the design aspects of this game, the conceptual aspects of this game. As far as the gameplay goes, I certainly had my issues with it, and wasn't as fond of it as a lot of people were. I feel like there's a lot of stop and go where I wish there was fluidity. And then there's, tons of minutia, some of which I touched on earlier episodes. but the combat is almost there for me, and I feel like there's a lot of cool aspects. Of course, the axe is great, and now that we've all beaten it, we can talk about the Blades of Chaos, which I think do some, in some ways, improve upon the combat and help you kind of pick up the pace a little bit and get your rhythm going. But I would have liked to see just a little more variety in combat. There's a lot of God of War games where you get multiple different weapons, and that doesn't even necessarily need to be the case here. But I just did feel a little bit stilted in plenty of combat situations. So I think it has a lot of potential to be really knocked out of the park with the sequel to this game, because obviously the studio is capable of making really solid combat systems, and I can totally feel for them in the fact that they they were doing a major change in direction for the series with this game, so it couldn't have been easy. There's some stuff, people talk about this game kind of like being revolutionary in a lot of ways. I feel like there is actually a lot of video gamey stuff that people kind of look over and don't recognize in this game. And I feel like Santa Monica jumping into a pseudo RPG, kind of like a lot of the Assassin's Creed games have been doing over the last several years, was not the smoothest transition, and especially the menus and just the RPG elements of upgrading your gear and adding like power-up stones into like runes into weapons and certain things like that. A lot of that is quite tangled, and I don't think it was very streamlined or smooth for the user experience. But yeah, kind of a mixed bag on God of War, but nonetheless, it's got a lot of fantastic stuff going on, and of course the story is really, really well done and fabulously acted, and was a blast to watch and ride along with the twists and turns. So that's why God of War is at number 4 for me. Should I jump to number 3?
Yeah, I think I'm assuming Dom and I are going to have it also on our list a little bit higher. I think you did a good job of describing a lot of things that kind of explain why it didn't land so high on your list. So I don't know if there's a lot for me to add there in that perspective that you hadn't already touched on.
Sure.
So I think once we get it to where it's a little bit higher on the list, that's when we can talk a little bit more of like even killer positive stuff. So yeah, go ahead with your 3.
I wouldn't say, just as far as, being a big fan of the series, this was not a disappointment in any stretch of the imagination, but it didn't knock it out of the park as far as the return of God of War for me.
Yeah, and I mean, we're talking about our top 5. Like, it's, anywhere you land on that list is still good.
Definitely high up there. Definitely a great game. So,
yeah.
Number 3 is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and that just barely jumped up over God of War. And I don't, I was thinking I don't necessarily believe that it's just because I played it right here at the end of 2018 leading into this show. I do think that just like with God of War, there's a lot with this game that I have mixed emotions on. I think that there's a lot of lackluster areas or parts to the single player campaign World of Light. A lot of improvements that you could have made. There's, once again, like with Mario Aces, there's difficulty spikes and random whack, really just kind of goofy ass challenges. And I think that it seems like the developers or Nintendo really thought that this whole spirit system was the shit, or was really fucking interesting, and I don't necessarily see that it is nearly as much. For me, it's about unlocking all these fighters, and it's kind of weird how that is almost like a just a side thing that you're doing throughout playing the game in various different ways that you can to unlock those characters. But I talked with Jerrad before the show a little bit about how I really hadn't gotten into this series before. I had kind of just watched a lot of people play it over the years, since I was a kid, and oddly enough, some of my non-gamer friends are more into this than I am, and so it's a weird hole, a weird gap in my in the spectrum of games that I've become familiar with over the years. But started with the 3DS version not long before picking up getting the Switch version, and so I am enjoying it from kind of a different perspective or situation where I'm still just learning the game and getting introduced to the franchise as a whole with these couple games that I've been playing. So I'm enjoying getting into the minutia of each individual fighter and spending a little time with them, and then moving on to the next one that I unlock, and really slowly plodding through each and every one. So there's a lot of enjoyment to be had for me there, where others might not find enjoyment because they are in a different situation with their familiarity with the series. So that has been enjoyable for me, and I think that is the thing that pushed it ahead of God of War for me, was the fun factor, the enjoyability for me. I've had a great time. Obviously, I haven't even mentioned yet, but of course it's a blast to play couch co-op. I haven't been playing online, but multiplayer couch co-op is a blast, because that's the foundation of Smash Bros. In the first place, and they've continued to nail it. So over the course of the next couple of weeks, I might have more to say about complaints and digging deeper into why I don't like World of Light as much. But the fact that I had a little bit more fun with this game than I did with God of War, I think is what pushed it just a little bit ahead. So, yeah.
I'll tack on there. Like, I'll echo what you said, that there's something to be said about the amount of characters and the depth to each character, and like the tiny little details of how each character plays, and then overall putting them all together, the balance between them. It's all that's all goddamn impressive. And I mean, you can kind of say well, this is 2 decades in the works of balancing these characters out, really, between all the games.
Yeah.
But it's still it's impressive what they're able to do there. But I definitely agree. I've started going through World of Light, and there's spots where I'm like, what the hell is that?
Just some Nintendo ass decisions.
Yeah.
But
cool game.
Kind of towards what you're saying, it reminds me that individual characters remind me of individual weapons in Bloodborne, where I like that. Kind of one of the complaints with Bloodborne is that it doesn't have as many weapons as a traditional Souls game. But the fact of the matter is each weapon has so many different options of how to attack, and is so deep in the different permutations that you have with it, that it, like I said, reminds me of the characters here, where every single character has so many different permutations and options and little minutia, nitty gritty that you can dig down deep into. So you're able to you're able to soak a lot out of it. As Dom said, I was laughing earlier, so suck it all up, So there's a lot to like Kirby, but there's a lot to be had there. Just like with weapons and Bloodborne, you can get in and grab a new one and spend a lot of time with it, and it really doesn't feel monotonous, because there's so many different little crevices to find of these characters that you can do new things with, and find interesting ways to play with them.
It was also on my honorable mentions list. It made my top 10. The weird thing with it is, after I had already unlocked all of the fighters, at this point, there's not a game I could say I had more fun with playing with friends than Smash. It's just a blast playing with your friends. Yeah. There's not a game I would say I've had less fun with playing by myself after I've unlocked all of the fighters. I think the most fun you can have a single player in that game is unlocking the fighters, because one of the cool things with Smash is that if you don't beat that fighter, when it pops up that a new opponent has emerged, you don't get them until you beat them. You know what I mean?
I love that. Yeah. I love that.
I'll say, just on the little thing of, it's a little weird how you unlock them. Definitely a kind of a Nintendo situation. I've got problems with Smash as far as its UI. I've always thought that it's very clunky and not friendly to the user. Very difficult to
it's
navigate.
designed by his wife. That's why.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Is it Satoru Iwata? Am I getting that right?
No,
it's not. Sakurai. Sakurai's wife does all of the menu design. People have complained about that for years. It's kind of like he makes the game and he's like,
clunky.
Hey, you got to make the design. And she's like, okay.
Jesus. But so, anyways, there's this thing called Challengers. There's this thing called Challengers Approach. And it's this door, but it's like hidden inside of, I think, the Games and More section. And it's very weird how like it'll only show up sometimes under certain conditions, and basically you kind of have to grab it while you can and jump in. It's weird that with so many fucking characters to unlock, it's weird that you can't just have that as one of the modes where it's like, listen, once I have tried this guy and he's come through and approached or whatever, then I don't understand why I can't just jump back in whenever I want. But like I said, that's kind of a Nintendo type of way of doing it. And so, unlocking the characters is fun, and there are plenty to unlock. But I can totally see how once I finish with that and World of Light isn't entertaining me, then, besides couch co-op, there's not going to be too much for me to do unless I just really am enjoying digging into certain characters to kind of master them.
Yeah. I think those are all of our 5, 4, 3, so I think we'll hop into our top 2s. For me, my number 2 is God of War. Honestly, going through my list this year, it was the hardest thing to decide between my 3, 2, 1 that I've had in a while. So in 2017, my number 1 game was Super Mario Odyssey. I know both of you, I think one of you had Horizon Zero Dawn, I think, and one of you had Breath of the Wild, or maybe it was something to that degree. But like Super Mario Odyssey to me was easily my favorite and I think the best game of that year. 2016, it was Inside. This year was tough. And with God of War, we talked about it, Dom, so I don't want to retread old ground too much. But I do think my problem with the combat wasn't that I felt it was lackluster. I think it just my expectations were set too high from what I had heard from people. And we talked about this. You even said you didn't remember that you said this, but when you first played God of War, you said, oh, it's the best Souls-like combat I've ever played. It's even better than Bloodborne or Dark Souls 3. So I went in with the expectation of like, oh, dang, this is really good. And I don't think it's bad necessarily. I talked about how I love the Norse mythology and how they implemented it. And as someone who's familiar with it, The Stranger, and if you're listening to the Game of the Year podcast, you should know we're going to be spoiling stuff. Obviously, The Stranger being Baldur, and as somebody who knows Norse mythology, like I talked about Dom, he was invulnerable, which already kind of ticked me off to the point that he was, oh, this is Baldur. But personality-wise, he was unlike any way Baldur's been approached in terms of writing. He's always seen as the arrogant pretty boy, and in this, he's kind of like the sloppy drunk, right? So I was kind of like, oh, is this Baldur or is this somebody else? Are they mixing powers or what exactly is going on? There's a ton of surprises. I told you guys I didn't know about the Blades of Chaos. I didn't know about Loki, the ending. A lot of surprises in this game. I do think I have to agree with Jordan on the sense that I do think the combat in this feels like Origins in the sense where it's a studio going a completely different direction with the game, and the first approach to it didn't necessarily hit on all cylinders for me. And I do think it could vastly improve in the sequel. Obviously, like I said, Odysseys I think is vastly improved from Origins. I don't think this is as bad as Origins. I think Origins was a lot rougher. The RPG systems I do think could use some tweaking. There's way too many folders and sub-menus. It gets a little busy.
Yeah.
But fantastic game. Axe throwing is incredible. I think the acting is phenomenal. I think we had some of the best character acting in the Spider-Mans and the God of Wars and Red Deads that I've played in a long time. I think all three of those protagonists were very well written and very well acted. I loved God of War. I do like that they teased the big gods, the big Acer gods, and they didn't really go full bore on that. I really appreciate that. I do like that there's enough there in terms of Easter eggs and hidden things that there's people questioning stuff. I love that when it comes to wondering what the next sequel is going to be, of like, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? I love that given how successful Marvel's been with Thor, that they didn't feel pigeonholed to that, and they were like, no, Thor's an asshole in this, as he's been told to be. He's kind of pudgy, which I can't wait to see a kind of pudgy Thor. We kind of got a tease of him, obviously, at the end of the game. I do think if this game would have met the expectations I had in terms of combat, it would have been my game of the year. But I do think its gameplay and narrative were closer than what I felt Red Dead's. I think the gunplay for Red Dead really marked it down for me. But like I said previously, this was one of the hardest years for me to... If you were to give me 3 index cards with my top 3 and mix them up and put them on a table and mark 1, 2, 3, I wouldn't be too upset with whatever order it ended up in, personally. But yeah, my number 2 is God of War. My number 1, since it's the only game left that you would assume, is exactly Batman Arkham Knight. So Spider-Man. I love this game. I haven't actually even had a chance to finish the 3rd DLC, which is unfortunate, but for me, when I'm talking about GOTY, I'm talking about like the package itself, obviously, because everyone maybe doesn't play the DLC. I do think the DLC is good. But with Spider-Man, I do think it hit the best in terms of narrative and gameplay. For me, I do think its narrative it didn't hit the highs that God of War or Red Dead Redemption 2 hit for me, but I don't think its gameplay ever hit the lows that Red Dead hit for me, or the mismanaged expectations that God of War did too. I just think it was solid all the way around. Obviously, we have our complaints with it. Jordan, me and you talked about how maybe Miles could have been used differently. There's sections of the game that maybe you could have done different things. But I do think from a top-down level, I do think in terms of narrative and gameplay, it hit both of those. I think it has excellent gameplay. I don't think it ever feels too repetitive. I think it took a lot of the systems from the Arkham series and improved on them and made them their own. It doesn't feel like copy-pasted Batman combat. It feels like this is Spider-Man combat. Yeah, I just love the game. I think with God of War they did an excellent job of teasing what's coming next. A great variety of suits. Jordan, me and you also talked about this. I'm glad that Insomniac didn't feel pigeonholed to only do suits that people wanted, and they did create some of their own unique suits, which is great. I'm glad they weren't afraid to do that. Yuri Lowenthal did an excellent job. I think a lot of the actors in this game did great. I know people kind of bag on it for having a traditional or expected Spider-Man story. I do think that is... I understand that argument, but I do think when you're launching a franchise like this, you kind of have to be a little bit on the safe side. I do think they took some interesting risks, and they set it up in a way that felt refreshing. Yeah, I really enjoyed Spider-Man. But like I said it before, if you would have said, hey, no, Red Dead has to be your game of the year or God of War, I'm okay with that. It's just, for me, Spider-Man, when I was putting it in my head and figuring out which one came out on top and rose to the cream of the crop. The cream of the crop. Spider-Man's it for me. Really enjoyed it, really loved it.
Spider-Man is an awesome damn game, as you just mentioned, and that's why it's my number 2.
Oh, damn. Dude.
Segue of the day right there. Anyway, everything you just said, pretty much agree with. The one thing, I'll start with, again, with the small gripes I had that make it number 2 and not number 1. One thing I kind of like doesn't put it quite over the top for me, and frankly, in pretty much any other year, my 1 or 2 would have been a 1 for sure. But the one thing that didn't quite, push this above my number 1 was the combat did get a little bit repetitive for me.
Okay.
Specifically the Sable outposts kind of just got like really irritating. And to be fair though, I did end up platining this game. So a lot of that kind of irritation came after beating the game and kind of in a pursuit of the platinum, wanting to go through and do all these Sable outposts. So those specifically got really like irritating, and I didn't mind necessarily the grinding aspect, because I didn't mind doing the random thug encounters and the demon hideouts and that kind of stuff. Those weren't as bad, but specifically the Sable outposts were just driving me a little bit nuts, and like those parts of the combat kind of just made me like wish I wasn't doing it, but I wanted to do it to get the trophy anyway, basically.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I mean, you can't say enough about how good it goddamn feels to swing around the city. It's unreal. Just the physics of it are so spot on. It's hard to describe. You just kind of have to do it yourself and just feel it. In addition to that, the way the music, swells up as you're swinging, and the way J. Jonah Jameson's radio station pops on every once in a while to complain about you as you're swinging along, and just there's little details like that just added up just make it a great experience.
The
like
two sets of voice
overall.
acting of like they recorded lines for if you're swinging or not swinging, he sounds a little bit exasperated. It's
right,
crazy.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff like that. In addition to that, you could be on a phone call with someone while you're swinging. All of a sudden, you stop really quick to go interrupt some thugs robbing a bank or whatever it is. You kind of hang up or just say, gotta go by, or something really quick like that. So the way that the programming there is impressive. Then in addition to that, as soon as you're done with that activity, he calls back and he's got a line of dialogue to reintroduce the phone call very, very naturally, which is like, holy shit, that's actually really impressive from a programming kind of perspective, that it felt so natural the way that, and it's obviously random whether or not you chose to go and stop those guys robbing the bank. It's little details like that kind of add up to make this game just really, really special. And then the story, I think, I've not watched this Into the Spider-Verse movie yet. People seem to love that, but otherwise, I've seen all the other Spider-Man movies, and the story in this game is far and away better. And obviously, it's animated and not live action acted, but the acting is, I mean, I like Yuri, whatever the hell his last name was, starts with an L.
Yeah.
I like him better than Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. I think new guy Tom Holland is really good too. He's got another movie. We'll see. They're both really good as Spider-Man. But yeah, the story was a bit. I saw it coming with the villains. They're mostly with the villains, if you know what I mean. This is a slightly newer game than God of War, so I won't outright spoil what goes on. But like after the first few chapters, you can see what they're going to do with the villains. It becomes pretty obvious. If you've seen any Spider-Man anything, then you know. But they did some different stuff with his aunt, with Aunt May and stuff like that. At least as far as I know, it was a little bit different. Certainly emotionally impactful. Overall, it was just a really great story. And Jerrad, you went on about months ago when we first played it. You gave a great speech on how good the final boss battle was and how impactful that was, and I couldn't agree more with that. Without getting into details, like that shit was like, ooh, that punches you in the gut, kind of good. Yeah, this game was awesome. I'm pumped for the sequel. So Spider-Man was just top notch. Like this is just like the superhero game, like the pinnacle.
The one thing I will say is there's two games I cried during this year. I cried during the end of Red Dead Redemption 2, and I actually cried during the ending of Spider-Man. So they were very emotionally impactful on me personally. Yeah.
And that sounds corny or whatever, but if you've played through Spider-Man, then you're listening to Jerrad and being like, yeah, I could see that. I was certainly on the brink as well at the end, because it is that impactful. Like it's just damn good, dude.
On the brink.
On the brink, yeah. Welcome to our new podcast about skiing or whatever. Go ahead.
So, number one for me, no surprises, is God of War.
Red Dead Redemption, baby!
Perhaps the greatest crime of this podcast is actually going to be the fact that I never even got to play Red Dead Redemption, so it's almost unfair of me to say a top 5 without having played that game.
It's fine. We can't get to everything.
Because I have limited time, but that game, from the sounds of it, is right up my alley, so it's kind of a bummer that I'm going to get to it one of these days. Then in which day, I'll come back and revise my list, so be it. Anyway, number 1 is God of War, because, and I'm going to say this, it is a perfect video game. And I know we talk about, 10 out of 10 doesn't mean perfect, yada, yada, yada. I think this game actually is perfect. Even if something is, we'll say, like, if you're speaking mathematically, 99.9999%, eventually you just say 100, because there's no real reason to say otherwise. It's not worth conversing about, So I'd say that God of War actually is a perfect video game. I'm going to start with that. I'm going to double down.
Well, it's like, there's like the perfect girl of your dreams is still gonna have stuff you don't like about her.
Yeah, she's like a foot fetish.
She's perfect.
Yeah.
Oh God, she's like perfect to you.
Unless that is more perfect too, I guess. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe foot fetish girl is the girl of someone's dreams.
Yeah.
There you go. It's certainly a subjective thing. I mean, I'm saying it's perfect, right? That might not mean you think it's perfect. But yeah, I think it's to me it's worth calling perfect. There's not really flaws that are even worth mentioning from when I'm playing through the game. So kind of how I just mentioned in Spider-Man, some of the combat, it's later parts in the game I kind of was like, I don't really want to do this. That doesn't happen in God of War for me at any point with the combat, with the story, with anything. It was just it was so fluid. Fluid in terms of how how the story was told, in terms of pacing, and in terms of switching between gameplay and cutscenes and things like that. I used to talk about how much I loved Uncharted 4 and The Last of Us because of how well they blended the gameplay and the cutscenes and the story. This does it even better, which I can't believe is possible, but it does. The whole one shot aspect of it. I don't know. There's not anything else I can say about that. It's just it's impressive. And the
I have a
gameplay
question for
too.
you. Sorry to interrupt you. I have a question for you. So, I know you really love this game. One thing I will say is a complaint for me that actually Cory Barlog said that was something that he was kind of upset that they weren't able to do in this game is the lack of boss fights, because he feels that that's very in tune with what God of War is, and he felt that there weren't enough boss fights. He said obviously they're difficult to make.
I agree.
He said that the biggest mistake that they made was giving the ogres and the trolls those giant boss battle health bars, because they don't actually function like bosses really. They're just like more difficult enemies.
Mini bosses.
Yeah, he actually talked about how that was a big struggle during development of like, do we keep those big bars? Do we give them normal health bars? How do you feel? I know you're not somebody who's super familiar with God of War. You only played 3, right? How do you feel in terms of the amount of boss battles in the game?
Just a note, God of War's always had lots of God boss battles, but then also lots of mini boss battles.
Like mythical creatures or like stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah, like centaurs
So this was,
or whatever.
so this game was ostensibly the first God of War game I ever finished. So when I went into it, I had no such complaints. You know?
Understandable.
It just felt like that was the way this game was designed, and it was best that way. Having since then gone and played God of War 3, I could definitely see if you were a huge fan of the series and how it was made that you would kind of be a little bummed out that, like there's not your typical video game boss battles in the same sense as you'd be used to in God of War. So I could definitely see how that would be a...
You also don't fight a lot
bit
of gods.
Bummer. True, yeah.
Yeah, you fight 3?
Yeah.
I think, yeah. Right? Magni, Modi, and Baldur. Right? 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with that. I don't have, like, that as a complaint myself, but I definitely could see that.
Understandable.
Because it's like, that's why I thought, what other game was I talking about? Far Cry 5, the boss battle at the very end felt really out of place. It just didn't seem right. They could have shoehorned more boss battles into God of War, but in that game, it would have felt off, I think, if they tried to do something more like the previous God of War games. The way they had built this new game, it shouldn't have had those kind of boss battles.
But there could be a counter argument being made that you fight so many trolls in this game. Like, you fight a lot of trolls. Like, just if you really think about it, you fight a lot of trolls throughout this game. Either they're magma trolls or ice trolls. You could ostensibly replace one of them with a boss, given a few narrative twists, right? Because you fight a lot of trolls in it. Even Cory Barlog talked about it. You fight a lot of them. You know what I mean? Whereas when you first face them, it's like, oh, is this like a mini boss or what is this? It's like kind of difficult. But as the game progresses, they just become the bigger enemy type, where it's like not really that difficult once you get how they handle. You know what I mean? But I understand where you're coming from, being as somebody who didn't play the series a whole lot. You wouldn't have that argument because you don't know that argument. It's just, it is what it is to you, and that's what you felt the game should be. So completely understandable.
Yeah. It's like I said. I mean, it is subjective, and it anything anyone says about it, comes with weight behind it, and their past experiences and
perspective
with the context of the everything else around the game too. That affects how you think about it. So that's certainly something to be said. But yeah, there was no point. There was no part of this game that I think was a negative. There was no part, like, even if I look back at Dark Souls or Ocarina of Time, there during the time I played those games, I could pinpoint moments of like, ugh, of eye roll, of like, here we go with this, or like, where the fuck is this key supposed to be? This specific point, is dumb. Even in the grander scheme of things, you overlook it because the rest of the game is so good. And God of War, I didn't even have those moments, so that's why to me, like, I don't even necessarily think it's innovative either. We've talked about that before too, where it doesn't necessarily do too much that's like brand new and crazy functions or whatever. It just does everything
so well.
Yeah. It's interesting in that sense, but yeah, I love how much the story is contained as well. The story they told is, I mean, your end goal from the start to the very end of the game is to spread those ashes, and that's how the game ends. I like that part of it. They really focused on what they were trying to tell, the story they were trying to tell, and that was that. But shoot, yeah, I don't know. It's a damn good game, you guys. So
shoot, yeah.
Jordan, what are your top two?
So I'm kind of going to talk about these interchangeably, so I'll go ahead and real quick, I also want to add a little caveat here. Don was talking about how he never even got to Red Dead Redemption 2. I crazily never played Assassin's Creed Odyssey this year. I got it for Christmas, and I think I might actually just go ahead and jump into that, because Origins is kind of ticking me off, where you could tell that I'm clearly having to grind through some side quests to get to like recommended levels for the main quest, which is not necessarily something that's been a part of the series up until now, and is a little bit
Jerrad or Jordan, I'll interrupt you really quick. So when I played through Odyssey, I ended up buying this bonus thing you can buy to basically speed up the rate at which you increase XP, by 50%.
Yeah.
So that's how I played through the game. So I didn't have, had I not had that, I may have had the same complaint. But put that out there.
So that's not great. But anyways, I'll get to Odyssey, and I'm sure it'll have been one of my top games, at least in the top 10. But, there's something to be said for the fact that I wasn't really a fan of Origins at first. I've come around a little bit, but still have issues with it. So I'm just kind of in a weird spot with Assassin's Creed, the series in general right now, but we'll see how I feel after Odyssey. Also, just a few days ago, I got and started playing Tetris Effect on PS4.
Ooh.
I wanted to kind of wait for a price drop from 40, but eventually I was just so enticed. Heard so many good things, and at the end of the day, it's $40, whatever. I jumped in. Glad I did. I will say that it's a lovely, gorgeous game. I don't have PSVR, but it's still so enveloping, and HDR on this big screen. It looks gorgeous and sounds amazing with the music. But the single player campaign has some weird difficulty spikes, kind of like what we were talking about with the Mario games. Like right now I'm having trouble with these levels where it's going from speed level 1, and then you'll clear a few lines, and it jumps up to 5, and then all of a sudden it jumps up to 9, and it makes these levels go from playable to just like a ridiculous breakneck speed, which I'm still kind of like with Smash Bros. I'm still learning to be good at Tetris, but I feel like I should be able to do this a little bit better than I am right now. So I'm in a weird spot with that game. Still definitely enjoying it. Still a really cool experience, and probably would have been on my list had I spent a little more time with it before this came up. But just wanted to mention those two. And so then my top two games, I'll just say Spidey's 1, Red Dead Redemption is 2. Very close neck and neck race here. The reason that Red Dead Redemption ended up being number 2, because I talked very, very highly of this game when it first came out, and still have a lot of great things to say. But I do think the further I've gotten into the game, the more it has just a little bit, not totally, but kind of soured a little bit, because much has been said about the controls. We've talked about it. You guys have mentioned it a little bit, or Jerrad, you did earlier. The controls is one thing, but there's a lot of stuff, and some of it's minutia, some of it's bigger stuff. There's a lot of stuff in this game that just doesn't necessarily come together, and ends up, kind of unfortunately falling apart in some places. My boy on YouTube, Nakey Jakey, just did a really great 40-minute video. He's a huge Rockstar fan, and talked a lot about how some of the systems, there's a lot of systems in this game, and a lot of times they don't always necessarily match up together and flow well together. For example, I really wanted to get into like a kind of like a horse racket thing that I was wanting to do here, where I was going to try to like just be stealing horses and then selling them to the fence, and there's just weird stuff where like you can't get that much for a horse because you don't have the title for it, but then it's like, what's the point of stealing horses in the first place? And then Nakey Jakey was going into the wanted system and how it's really kind of broken, like depending upon what your really super specific situation is on how you're dressed or what mask you have on or whatever. Depends on how like policemen will recognize you, or if people will freak out if you're walking through town, if you killed somebody or whatever. So I do think the wanted system's kind of broken in that sense. There's a lot of stuff that like people have figured out now that we've had some time with the game on how these systems work. And I think that a lot of it is, I wouldn't say broken, but a lot of it just falls apart. Another good example is the fact that you like have to constantly re-equip your whole weapon wheel basically when you're jumping off of your horse, because your horse is kind of like holding all of your equipment. But they reset your whole weapon wheel. You gotta like scroll through everything and put it where you want it every time you jump off. And then they also reset your ammo type so that you have to jump back through each gun and repick the ammo type that you were previously using. And I know that some of this stuff sounds like little minutia, but there's just, when it is such a complicated game and there are multiple occasions of these intricate systems not matching up and flowing well together, unfortunately, the game starts to break down in certain ways, and that keeps it from the true greatness that I thought that it was going to fully achieve when I first started playing it. There's obviously still so much that I like about it, especially the story and the characters, and I do enjoy the pacing and the immersion in the world. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that seems like stubborn Rockstar stuff, a lot of antiquated stuff, and there's definitely, the shooting's not great. So there's unfortunately some things that keep this, in a lot of ways, incredible masterpiece, from reaching the true heights of, some of my favorite games of all time, like The Witcher 3, which I was comparing it to initially. So really, really love Red Dead, but like I said, there's just eventually the issues really start piling up, and so that's what kept it in the number 2 slot as opposed to number 1, which is Spider-Man, and a game that I have so much fun with and really enjoyed the shit out of. Didn't think that it was as good of a game as Red Dead and thought that it wouldn't be taking the slot, but now that I look back and talking about with things kind of falling apart with Red Dead, Spider-Man in most areas holds up so well and is such a complete and well put together package. Sure, the story's not gonna blow your fucking mind, but I do think that it's really solid and well told and intriguing and easy to get invested in. Jerrad, you mentioned the fabulous acting, which is top to bottom. I've been super surprised watching people pick up a controller, a lot of people that aren't even really gamers at my house, and then just start swinging after watching for just a couple minutes someone else play, because of how intuitive the system is built. I do think the combat in certain situations in the game, gameplay situations, can get repetitive, and I also think that there can be times when it borrows too heavily from the Arkham series, but for the most part I think it's really done a great job of refining a lot of that stuff, and like I was saying, it's just the complete package top to bottom. It has so much to offer, certainly lots of value, but then if you're a Spider-Man fan or a superhero fan, there's going to be a lot there for you too. So yeah, man, Jerrad, you kind of hinted at this. I definitely would have tweaked the way that they wove in the Mary Jane and Miles Morales parts, especially like the gameplay specifically, not into the story as much. But
that was a little weird.
Yeah, that's my least favorite part of the game, were the Mary Jane and Miles parts. Definitely thought they were rough, and but I enjoyed the puzzle stuff as Peter Parker, playing as Peter in the lab, doing the DNA matchups and shit like that. I really enjoyed all of the Peter Parker Spider-Man stuff, just not the ancillary characters with their gameplay moments. But yeah, still enjoying the DLC. About to jump into the third one since I finished the second one now. And so, yeah, I think just when it comes to being a complete package, looking back at it now and mulling it over a little bit now that I've got some distance from my initial thoughts on Red Dead, I think that it does, pull out the win here just a little bit above Red Dead because, yeah, it's more top to bottom. Got that complete package. So,
and
Spider.
Man, the crazy thing is, we're just getting started with that franchise. Like that's the craziest thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and when we look back on it, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays in terms of Marvel games moving forward, because it was the first game in their new structure and direction. So.
Yeah.
Let's get to our top 10 collectively. So the way it works is we all gave our top 10 lists, and then in reverse order. So your number 1 got 10 points, your number 2 got 9 points, so on and so forth. I added all of our points together, and that's how we determined our game of the year. It's an easy way where we don't have to argue for hours or all this stuff. I think and we don't take it too much to heart. It's our collective game of the year, but that's why I like to talk about. Put a lot of the onus and spotlight on our personal lists, because I think that's more important, because we all do have different perspectives. We all do have different expectations or wants from certain franchises. So that's why I think individual lists are more important. The collective thing is cool, so we can say this was our collective game of the year, but
some nice, good math.
I digress. So coming in at number 10, Fallout 76. Obviously, this is controversial for it being on Dom's list, but like he said, he didn't really have a lot of the issues people had. He didn't go in with the negative stigma people had. And it's really interesting because you're doing it from the perspective of somebody who plays pretty much alone. So, most people, I think, try to team up or get with other players, right? Whereas you kind of went the more solo route. Number 8, we actually have a tie. So 8A and 8B. Celeste, which was my indie darling of the year. Absolutely loved it. And
darling.
What I would assume is one of Jordan's indie darlings of the year, 8B, only because it's alphabetical order, Dead Cells. Dead Cells tied it at number 8 with Celeste.
I need to get around to Celeste, by the way.
Me too.
It's good. I don't want to build up expectations too much, but it is a very solid platformer. Cool. It's actually available on Games with Gold for free this month. Super dope. So I might actually play through it again and get the achievements. Number 7 was actually on Jordan and I's list. Monster Hunter World. Fantastic game. Obviously, it could do some more things to get it more Western friendly, but I do think it's a good start to a more Western focused direction for that franchise. They still have their very Japanese centric titles, but I can't wait to see what the follow up to Monster Hunter World is. I do think we're getting DLC this year for like a winter thing in the fall, like some expansion.
They announced an expansion. Yeah.
Yep.
It's going to be Monster Hunter 10U XX Generations.
Next up, we're getting to the games that all of us either had on our list or ranked high on at least 2 of our lists. So at number 5, we actually have a tie between 2 games. 5A is Hollow Knight, which was actually on all 3 of our lists. I think we all really enjoyed that game. 5B is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So Jordan had that a lot higher than Dom and I, but Dom and I both also had it on our list. Or maybe
good
I
game.
just had it on my
Great
list.
game.
Yeah, good game. It's number 5, so no complaints there. Number 4, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Dom and I were pretty high on this.
Assassin's Creed Odyssey!
If you would have played this game this year, I would assume it would have been on your top 10. As to how high or low, who knows? But it's safe to say it probably would have ended up on your top 10. Number 3, Red Dead Redemption 2. great game. Obviously, Jordan and I really enjoyed it. Dom didn't give it respect, and he didn't play it, so...
Gee, I
Thanks
wonder
a lot, Dom.
I wonder what 1
Thanks
and
a
2
lot.
are.
1 and 2. Yeah, so number 2 is God of War. Obviously, Dom had it at number 1. I had it at number 2. Jordan had it at number 4. Is it 4? I think 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, after Smash Bros.
Yeah, so obviously Dom and I were higher on it than Jordan was. And then our number 1, which came in at number 1 on 2 of our 3 lists, and number 2 on the third one was Spider-Man. So if you haven't listened to us for a long time, our game of the year for the last couple of years, we started the podcast in 2016. Our game of the year that year was Dark Souls 3.
Great game.
Great game. Last year, in 2017, our game
Horizon Zero Dawn, baby!
our game of the year was Super Mario Odyssey.
Oh.
I think it was Super Mario Odyssey, Horizon Zero Dawn, and then Breath of the Wild, I think was number 3. And this year, Spider-Man PS4. Honestly, if Spider-Man, God of War, Red Dead all came in at number 1, I would have been happy with it. Like I said on my personal list, I really enjoyed all 3 of those games a lot. Whereas with 2017, I had a lot of complaints with Breath of the Wild. For me personally, with God of War, even the stuff I wasn't super in love with, it was more expectation based on, like I said before. Whereas with Breath of the Wild, there were things that I think were very overstated, and I think people were a little bit hyperbolic in their praise of Breath of the Wild, in my opinion. But yeah, our game of the year for 2018 is Spider-Man PS4. I want to ask you guys real quick, early prediction, what do you think will be... What do you think one of the highest games for us will be? Like, if you had a, not necessarily number 1, but if you had a bank on one landing in the top 3. I think Sekiro has a strong chance if it ends up being good. I'm still worried about the Activision partnership. I think I'm just cautiously optimistic on that, but I think Sekiro is definitely a safe bet because it is a From game, and we tend to be pretty high on those as of recently. So,
I agree. I think Sekiro... you heard
Kingdom Hearts 3
Jordan?
as well. I think has a good chance.
Yeah, KH3, and now I might surprise you a little bit, but I'll say I wouldn't be surprised if Anthem ends up, being pretty high on our list. Even though I'm very, cautious about this game.
Yeah, it's tough.
Could be. I think Jerrad. I think The Outer Worlds is going to have a good shot.
Ooh, good call. Yeah.
If it comes out next year,
I'll
it's
end up
supposed
playing
to.
it.
Yeah.
Right. I'm also not going to play Anthem though. So.
Yeah. But it depends. Like if Anthem is number 1 or 2 on both Jordan and I's list, it's going to rank pretty high overall.
Right.
So it's like,
Yeah. So fuck you, Dom. Who cares?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Look, Red Dead
Outer
Redemption
Worlds,
2.
son.
Red Dead Redemption 2 came in at number 3, and you didn't play it, Dom. So there's always a chance that it ends up in the top 3. Yeah. Outer Worlds is a
We
good
still
call,
have
though.
some taste.
I'm trying to think. Metroid Prime 4. Are we all getting that if it comes out this year?
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
I mean, Last of Us Part 2, but that's not coming out this year. But yeah, I think that would be up there as well. I'm not sold that game's coming out this year.
Yeah. Now that Neil said we'll have more to show you, it's like, all right.
Well, they posted a picture on New Year's of like them hiring people and like doing like acting and stuff. I'm like, I want it to come out this year. I don't think so. I'm trying to think. Is there any other game that all 3 of us will enjoy? Because it's not so much the biggest title of the year, right? Animal Crossing. Are all 3 of us getting that? I'm getting it for sure. I just don't know where you guys lie.
I'd say we're more likely to all love Pokemon. We're more likely to all love Pokemon, I think.
Ooh, Pokemon's a good one. Where are you on that, Dom? Are you interested?
Come on,
We'll see.
Dom.
We'll see. I've been keeping tabs on what's coming out specifically on Switch next year because I'm looking for.
This year.
I've been looking for like a shit this year. You're right.
Yeah.
My bad. First time I made that mistake so far. But anyway, I've been looking for some RPGs on Switch. I've just been feeling the itch, for Switch.
I'm worried about Fire Emblem 3 Houses. I want it to be good, but
Yeah.
who knows? Luigi's Mansion 3. Are we all interested in that?
No.
Sure.
No, you're not
I
interested
mean, when
in
it's
Luigi's Mansion?
$30. Yeah.
Interesting. Sorry, I'm just trying to think of other things. My plan is to play Gears of War 4 in the next couple of weeks, Dom.
Ooh.
So I'm ready for Gears 5 this fall. Them going a more narrative approach, and it seems like they're focusing more. They took out the of war in the title, and I do think that is a choice based on the direction of the game, and I do think they're focusing more on narrative, and I do think it could be a big surprise. We
More
already
like Gears of Boar.
I'm thinking. So Sony has Days Gone and Dreams that are probably coming out this year. I don't know. I'm probably not getting Days Gone. If it reviews well, I might, but I'm kind of worried about that game. Crackdown 3 probably won't obviously be there. I'm just going through the titles real quick. Yeah, I think we named a lot of the strong ones. I mean, if Resident Evil 2 comes out to stellar reviews, I might get on that train. Not right away because I'm going to go Kingdom Hearts 3 first, but who knows? And Metro Exodus, I think, is a dark horse as well. Sorry.
Plus,
wait, so are we all playing KH3 around launch then?
Hell yes.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I didn't know that you guys, like Dom, I figured you were on board since you kind of have been catching up. Jerrad, I didn't know you were. Are you like day one then?
Yeah, I'll probably watch a video of like all of the random spin-off games I didn't play, just to like get me.
Oh yeah, I've been watching recaps and I've played the whole series. So
I'm gonna be very spiteful and angry that it never came to Xbox, the collection, but I'll still pick it up day one.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan, I'll give you a great big old American Pie Steven Stifler. Hell yes!
Jesus.
Next week we're going to return to our normal type of show, obviously talking about what we've been playing and the news and all that good stuff. There was some news that dropped the day of recording this regarding Bungie and Activision and some other crazy stuff happening. So we'll have plenty to talk about next week. We might even have a guest.
Whoa!
Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed our personal Game of the Year lists. We all have similar tastes, but also very different tastes at the same time. So it's really cool how we approach games and our perspective. And I do think we're going to have a lot of conversations in the new year. We didn't even mention any indie games that might float to the top. Some random indie game darling that we all fall in love with. But yeah, we'll catch you guys next week for episode 129. Thank you guys for listening. If you can, please follow us on iTunes. Leave us a rating. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Leave us a like if you can. Follow us on Twitter at CTRLINT. It's Controlled Interests abbreviated. I am at Jerrad_. Dom is at Dom's Oreos. And Jordan is at Malamotus. Catch you guys next time. Bye.